Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something profound today, something that might just change your life forever. I want to share with you one of the most powerful forces in the universe, something so potent yet so misunderstood. And what's fascinating is that this force is available to all of us, rich or poor, educated or not, young or old. You know what it is? It's silence. Yes, silence. Now you might be thinking, Jim, how can silence get me anything? Well, let me tell you a story. Years ago, I met a man who was worth millions. I expected him to be like most successful people I'd met, charismatic, talkative, commanding attention. But you know what struck me about him? His silence. He was the quietest person in every room he entered. While others were busy telling everyone how successful they were, he was busy being successful. Here's what I've learned. The most powerful people in any room are usually the ones saying the least. Now, isn't that fascinating? We live in a world where everybody's talking, everybody's sharing, everybody's telling everybody else what to do. But the real power, it's in silence. Let me give you a fundamental principle. Words are like currency. The more you spend them, the less valuable they become. But silence. Silence is like compound interest. It grows in value over time. Now, here's something crucial I want you to understand. There are three kinds of silence that can transform your life. First, there's strategic silence, knowing when not to speak. Second, there's observational silence, the power to watch and learn. And third, there's internal silence, the ability to quiet your own mind. Let's talk about strategic silence first. You see, most people have this compelling urge to fill every moment with words. They're like a leaky faucet, drip, drip, dripping all day long. But successful people, they understand the power of strategic silence. I remember being in a negotiation once. There was this young fellow across the table, and every time there was a pause in the conversation, he'd jump in with another point, another concession. He was so afraid of silence that he gave away everything. The other party just sat there saying nothing and got everything they wanted. You see, that's the first secret in business, in relationships, in life. The person who can stay silent the longest often wins. It's like a game of cards. The moment you show your hand, you've lost your advantage. Let me tell you something else about strategic silence. In your journey to success, you'll face criticism, doubts, and negativity. People will tell you why you can't succeed, why your dreams are too big, why you should settle for less. You know what the most powerful response is? Silence. When someone tells you it can't be done, don't argue, don't defend, don't explain. Just stay silent and let your results do the talking. Success is the best revenge, but silence is its closest friend. Now, let's talk about observational silence. This is where the real magic happens. You see, while everyone else is busy talking about what they know, the silent observer is busy learning what they don't know. I've been to thousands of seminars, met countless successful people, and do you know what I noticed? The most successful people in any room are usually the best listeners. They're not waiting for their turn to speak, they're actually listening, observing, learning. Here's a principle that changed my life. Your power to observe is directly proportional to your ability to stay silent. Think about it. When you're talking, what are you learning? Nothing. You're just recycling what you already know. But when you're silent, really silent, you start noticing things. You notice body language. You notice tone of voice. You notice the subtle shifts in a room. You notice opportunities that others miss because they're too busy talking. I tell my students all the time, if you want to increase your value in the marketplace, increase your ability to observe. And to observe effectively, you must master the art of silence. Let me share something powerful with you. In my early days, I used to think success was about having all the answers. But then I met my mentor, and he taught me something that changed everything. He said, Jim, success isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions and then being silent enough to hear the answers. Now let's talk about internal silence. This is perhaps the most powerful form of silence, yet it's the one most people struggle with the most. You see, we all have this constant chatter in our minds, doubts, fears, worries, judgments. It's like having a negative radio station playing in your head 24/7. But here's what I've learned. Your outer world is a reflection of your inner world. If you can't find silence within yourself, you'll never find it in the world around you. Think about this. Every great invention, every breakthrough, every moment of genius, where did it come from? It came from a moment of inner silence. It came from that space between thoughts where creativity lives. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, Jim. This all sounds good, but how do I actually practice silence in a world that never shuts up? Well, let me give you some practical strategies. First, start small. Begin with 5 minutes of silence every morning. No phone, no TV, no radio, just you and silence. It's like working out. You don't start with heavy weights, you build up gradually. Second, practice what I call selective silence. Choose certain situations where you would normally speak and choose to stay silent instead. Maybe it's in a meeting, maybe it's in a conversation, maybe it's when someone criticizes you. Third, develop what I call silence triggers. These are moments throughout your day that return to silence. It could be when you stop at a red light, when you drink your coffee, when you walk through a doorway. Here's something fascinating about silence. It's not just the absent noise, it's the presence of power. When you're silent, you're not doing nothing, you're doing something very specific and very powerful. You're allowing your mind to process, to understand, to create. Let me tell you about something I call the silence ratio. The most successful people I know maintain a specific ratio between speaking and silence. They listen about 80% of the time and speak about 20% of the time. Now, isn't that interesting? Most people have it exactly backwards. Remember, these words are like arrows. Once they leave your bow, you can't take them back. But silence. Silence is like a shield that protects you from making mistakes, from revealing too much, from weakening your position. Here's another principle. The quality of your silence determines the quality of your success. Poor quality silence is when you're silent, but your mind is racing, planning what to say next, judging, criticizing. High quality silence is when you're truly present, truly observing, truly learning. Now, let me share something about silence and leadership. The greatest leaders I've known weren't the ones who talked the most. They were the ones who listened the most. They understood that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about creating the space for others to find the answers. Think about this. When you're silent, you become mysterious, and mystery creates value. Look at any luxury brand. They don't tell you everything. They maintain an air of mystery. They understand that what's left unsaid is often more powerful than what's said. Here's another secret about silence. It creates scarcity. And in economics, what happens when something becomes scarce? It becomes valuable. When you speak less, your words become more valuable. People lean in to hear what you have to say. Let me tell you about what I call the silence investment strategy. Just like you invest money to make more money, you need to invest in silence to create more power. Every moment of strategic silence is like putting money in the bank. It compounds over time. You see, most people don't understand this. They think success is about being seen, being heard, making noise. But true success often happens in silence. It happens in those quiet moments when you're planning, thinking, observing, learning. Here's something else about silence. It gives you time to align your actions with your values. When you're constantly talking, constantly reacting, you often find yourself saying things you don't mean, making promises you can't keep, creating problems you don't need. But when you practice silence, you give yourself the gift of choice. You choose your words carefully. You choose your actions deliberately. You choose your responses thoughtfully. Let me share with you what I call the silent success sequence. First, you practice silence. This leads to better observation. Better observation leads to deeper understanding. Deeper understanding leads to more effective action. More effective action leads to better results. Now, here's something crucial about silence and personal development. Most people think personal development is about learning new things. But often it's about unlearning old things. And unlearning happens in silence. Think about it. Every breakthrough in your life will come from a moment of silence. Every transformation begins with a quiet realization. Every quantum leap starts with a silent decision. Let me tell you about the silent power principle. The more power you have, the less you need to speak about it. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. Real power is like gravity. It pulls things toward it without making a sound. Here's another fascinating thing about silence. It helps you develop what I call responsibility. The ability to choose your response rather than just react. When you're silent, you create a gap between stimulus and response. In that gap lies your freedom to choose. Now, let's talk about silence and wealth. You see, most people think wealth is about making noise in the marketplace. But real wealth is often built in silence. While others are talking about what they're going to do, the wealthy are quietly doing it. Remember this principle. The noise you make is inversely proportional to the wealth you create. The more you talk about what you're going to do, the less energy you have to actually do it. Here's something else about silence and success. Silence helps you develop patience. And patience, my friends, is one of the most important qualities for success. The ability to stay silent, to wait, to let things develop, that's where the real power lies. Let me share with you what I call the silent achievement protocol. First, you set your goals in silence. Then you plan in silence. Then you work in silence. And finally, you let your results make the noise. You see, most people have it backwards. They make noise about what they're going to do. Then they make noise while they're doing it. Then they make noise about what they've done. But the truly successful, they operate in silence until success makes noise on its own. Here's another powerful principle. Silence is the father of creativity. When you're constantly consuming noise, social media, news, gossip, you're filling your mind with other people's thoughts. But when you're silent, you create space for your own original thoughts to emerge. Think about this. Every great book, every great painting, every great invention came from someone who was willing to be silent long enough to hear their own creative voice. Now, let me tell you about what I call the silent productivity formula. The quality of your work is directly proportional to the quality of your silence. When you work in silence, you work at a deeper level. You access parts of your mind that noise drowns out. Here's something fascinating about silence and relationships. The deepest connections happen in silence. Think about it. When you're truly connected with someone, you don't need to fill every moment with words. You can just be together in comfortable silence. Remember this. The quality of your silence determines the quality of your relationships. Poor quality silence is awkward, tense, uncomfortable. High quality silence is peaceful, connecting, nurturing. Let me share with you what I call the silent success sequence. First comes silent observation. Then comes silent learning. Then comes silent planning. Then comes silent action. And finally comes silent achievement. You see, most people want to skip straight to achievement, and they want to make noise about it along the way. But real success follows this sequence, and it happens largely in silence. Here's another principle about silence and success. Silence helps you develop wisdom. And wisdom, my friends, is worth more than gold. While knowledge comes from learning, wisdom comes from listening. And you can't listen if you're always talking. Let me tell you about what I call the silent wealth building strategy. Instead of telling people about your plans, show them your results. Instead of talking about what you're going to do it quietly and let the results speak for themselves. Remember this, the most powerful force in the universe is not noise, it's silence. It's in silence that stars are born. It's in silence that seeds grow. It's in silence that transformation happens. You see, most people spend their entire lives running from silence. They fill every moment with noise, television, radio, social media, endless chatter. But what they don't realize is that they're running from the very thing that could transform their lives. Let me tell you something about life that took me years to understand. Life's greatest messages don't come through words, they come through silence. The most important realizations, the deepest insights, and most profound changes, they all happen in moments of silence. Think about the most significant moments in your life. Were they filled with noise or did they happen in silence? That moment when you realized your true purpose. That moment when you fell in love. That moment when you knew you had to change your life. These moments happen in silence. Here's a principle that changed my life. The quality of your silence determines the quality of your existence. Poor quality silence is when you're physically quiet but mentally noisy. High quality silence is when your mind, body, and spirit are all aligned in stillness. Let me share with you what I call the life message matrix. There are 4 types of messages life sends us. First, there are the loud, obvious messages, the crises, the emergencies, the wake-up calls. Most people only hear these. Second, there are the soft messages, the subtle hints, the gentle nudges, the quiet whispers of intuition. These come only in silence. Third, there are the deep messages, the profound truths about who you are and why you're here. These can only be heard in extended periods of silence. And fourth, there are the transformative messages, the insights that completely change your life's direction. These messages, They only come when you've mastered the art of silence. Now, here's something fascinating about life. It's constantly trying to communicate with us, but we're usually too noisy to hear it. It's like trying to hear a whisper at a rock concert. The message is there, but we can't hear it above our own noise. Let me tell you about what I call the silent life principles. First principle, life's most important messages come in whispers, not shouts. Second principle, the deeper the silence, the deeper the message. Third principle, what you hear in silence is worth more than what you hear in noise. You see, most people go through life at the surface level. They live in reaction to the noise around them. They never dive deep enough into silence to hear life's real messages. But the people who create extraordinary lives, they've learned to dive deep. Here's another truth about life. Your greatest breakthroughs will always come after periods of silence. Think about it. Every major spiritual teacher in history spent time in silence. Every great philosopher embraced silence. Every transformative figure understood the power of silence. Let me share with you what I call the silent life transformation sequence. First comes the silence. In that silence comes the question. From that question comes the insight. From that insight comes the change. And from that change comes the transformation. Most people want to skip straight to the transformation. They want to change their lives without going through the silence. But it doesn't work that way. Real transformation always begins in silence. Here's something else about life's messages. They come in their own time, not yours. You can't force them. You can't demand them. All you can do is create the silence necessary to receive them. Think about this. Life is like a wise teacher. It doesn't shout its lessons. It whispers them. And just like in a classroom, if you're making noise, you're going to miss the lesson. Let me tell you about what I call the silent life wisdom. First wisdom, the answers you're seeking are already within you, but you can only hear them in silence. Second wisdom, the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your questions, and the best questions arise in silence. Third wisdom, your life's purpose isn't found in noise, it's found in silence. Now, here's something profound about life. It operates in cycles of action and silence. Just like nature has its seasons, your life has its rhythms. There's a time for action and a time for silence. Most people get stuck in constant action, never allowing themselves the silence they need to grow. Let me share with you the silent life protocol. Every day, create periods of silence. Use these periods to ask yourself deep questions. Listen for the answers. Act on what you hear. Repeat this process daily and watch your life transform. You see, most people think life is about doing more, achieving more, acquiring more. But the truth is, life is about becoming more. And becoming happens in silence. Here's another principle about life. The deeper you go into silence, the more clearly you can hear life's messages. It's like tuning a radio. The less static there is, the clearer the signal becomes. Think about this. Every major decision in your life should come from a place of silence. Not from reaction, not from emotion, not from pressure, but from that quiet place within wisdom resides. Let me tell you about what I call the silent life mastery. First level, learning to be physically silent. Second level, learning to be mentally silent. Third level, learning to be emotionally silent. Fourth level, learning to be spiritually silent. Most people never get past the first level. They might be physically quiet, but their minds are racing, their emotions are turbulent, their spirits are restless. But true life mastery, it comes when you can be silent at all levels. Here's something else about life's messages. They often come in paradoxes. Success comes from failure. Strength comes from weakness. Growth comes from pain. But you can only understand these paradoxes in silence. Let me share with you the silent life guidelines. First guideline, create daily periods of silence. Second guideline, use these periods for deep reflection. Third guideline, listen more than you speak. Fourth guideline, act from silence, not from noise. You see, most people live their lives in reaction to the world around them. They're like leaves blown by the wind, moving wherever the noise takes them. But when you learn to live from silence, you become like the tree, rooted, stable, growing in your own direction. Here's another truth about life. Your greatest power lies in your ability to be silent. When you're silent, you can observe. When you observe, you can understand. When you understand, you can choose. When you can choose, you have power. Think about this. Every significant change in your life will begin with a moment of silence. That moment when you realize something has to change. That moment when you see clearly what needs to be done. That moment when you find the courage to take action. Let me tell you about what I call the silent life revolution. It begins with one simple decision: to embrace silence instead of running from it. To welcome those quiet moments instead of filling them with noise. To listen deeply instead of speaking superficially. Remember this, life's most important messages don't come with fanfare. They come in those quiet moments when you're ready to listen. They come when you've created enough silence to hear them. Ladies and gentlemen, let me leave you with this final thought. Your life will always be filled with noise. The world will always be trying to distract you, to get you to react, to make you speak when you should be silent. But your power, your real power, it lies in your ability to say nothing and get everything. Thank you, and remember, the next time you're tempted to speak, ask yourself if silence might serve you better. Because in the end, it's not what you say that determines your success, it's what you don't say.